Hi, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to this workshop today, Configuring Oracle Functions. We'll be running through the session today with the workshop showing you different sessions of the workshop. And without further ado, I will hand over to Atul, who will be running you through this today. For any questions, please go through the Q&A and we will answer them as we move along. Thank you and welcome. Over to you, Atul.
Thank you, Jane. Hello, everyone. I'm Atul. I have been working with Oracle Functions for past 2 years. And today, we are going to talk about quite small. We'll just talk about a bit basics about the functions. When can you use it? What setting of function actually means, things like that. And then we'll quickly jump to demo. Okay, so what is functions? Functions is a serverless product from Oracle Cloud, which basically means that the user, they care about their code and how that works. And Oracle Cloud, we take care of the infrastructure around it. So I'll just take an example to make it simple. You can think of, let's say, if I have built an application. When the application is ready and I want to deploy it, in a traditional way, I had few options, right? Probably I'll just create a VM and I'll deploy the application there based on the scale or components of that application. I might have multiple VMs to do that, right? And then during the application lifecycle, I need to take care of few things other than the code of application itself. So for example, I'll be taking care of patching all the software stack that is inside that VM, right? And that would be true for all the VMs that I have. I would also be taking care of the scale of that application. Right? As users start coming in and the application grows, I need to take care of how many virtual machines I want, how to scale them up, down based on the user demands and things like that, right? So over time, that ops workload will be a lot in compared to the workload that we are dedicating to develop that application, the code part of it. Right? Oracle Functions attempt to solve it in a way that once you give us your code wrapped inside a Docker container image, we take care of a lot of things for you. So for example, the Oracle Functions is autonomous, right? So which means that based on the demand that you have, your code will be scaled up and scaled down, right, based on the requirement. The code where your Oracle function runs, the VM where it runs, is actually patched and managed by Oracle. So we'll take care of all the security patching, updates, updating the base OS, things like that. Other than that, it's pay per use. So you don't pay for the whole life cycle of your application. So for example, in the previous case, if you have a number of VMs running, you're paying for those VMs for 24 hours a day. Right? In this case, you only pay for your execution time. So you only pay for the time your function, your code actually executes and nothing else. Right? Other than that, it's event-driven. So you can plug in Oracle functions with Oracle events and other Oracle services as well, where you can create different kinds of triggers. And based on that, your function can actually execute, right? A trigger can be, for example, let's say if one of your user has sent a request, an API request to your application. In that case, your application can trigger a function, right? That can be one of the trigger. There is Oracle events involved. So for example, when you upload a file in an object storage bucket, right? In that case, there can be an event trigger which can actually invoke your function, which can do some data processing on your file that was uploaded, right? So things like that we can do with Oracle functions. So how it all works? The workflow is quite simple. You create your application, you wrap in a Docker container, and then you push that function image, that container image to OCI registry. Right? After that, you create a function and configure some kind of trigger for it. We'll talk about triggers in this presentation. We'll talk a bit more. once you have the trigger configured, whenever that trigger actually gets invoked, it calls for your function. The function executes, and you only pay for the code execution time. Right? And all of this can be done in parallel also. So, for example, if you have a lot of user workload and hundreds or thousands of users are actually coming to your app, you can scale up to that level. You can scale up hundreds of thousands of function containers at once. So what are these containers? What are these function containers built of, right? The function itself is polyglot, so we support multiple languages, right? Which means we provide FDK, direct FDK support for Python, Java, Go, Node, and Ruby as of now. Other than that, we also support bringing your own Docker file, your own micronet VM, Graal VM. So basically any container which support function contract, you'll be able to run it as function in OCI function service. Let's move to the functions integration. Functions as a service is integrated with multiple OCI and external services. So for example, I talked about the triggers, right? These are the kind of triggers that we can use, right? You can configure certain kind of event. You can configure a notification, an API. You can configure function with API gateway, service connector hub, and others, right? And with all these different scenarios, you can trigger your function. Of course, function uses the Oracle OCI registry, OCIR, for pulling the image. Oracle function can also use other different OCI services like object storage, autonomous DB, secrets, and other services as well. You can also send your logs and metrics for monitoring the performance of the function, debugging purpose, and things like that. So now, before we move to demo, if there are any questions, I would answer them. Any questions that we want to answer as of now?
There are a couple of questions. Is it possible to deploy a whole front-end application as microservices in functions?
Yes, it is possible. You can deploy a whole front-end application. Only thing is that your application itself will be stateless. And yeah, I think that's the only thing to consider, but you can do it.
Okay, yeah, you can move on.
Okay, let's move to demo then. Before moving to demo, I would like to highlight these two links. Everything that I'm going to talk here about in the demo is in this quick start guide. So you can always go refer that and follow along with that guide. Also, I'm going to talk about two different function samples today. One is pretty simple hello world function, which you can get, which is basically packed as a sample with FNCLI that we'll talk about. Other one is a bit more complicated use case where we are going to use an object storage trigger, where if you upload a file to an object storage bucket, a function would get triggered, and that function will do some processing, copy some data from one bucket to another bucket, and that way we'll achieve some kind of data backup, right? That function sample is actually hosted here with other function sample. So you can go and take a look at the code. And this also has a quite good README where you can basically follow that README to configure that function. So let's move to the demo.
There's a couple more questions that have just come in. Is it similar to Lambda of AWS?
Yes, it is similar to Lambda.
Okay. Why do we need to expose Docker images to the user?
So as of now, this is how we have configured. So we wanted to support as many languages and as possible. So we decided on keeping the container image as the abstraction layer, where you can basically package a container and provide it to us and we'll run it. But in future, we can see that we might move to a direction where we can have code-only functions where you just provide your code and we take care of the rest.
Okay. Yes, we will share the links. I'll share the links in the chat. Why is Oracle Cloud better than any other cloud, technically speaking?
So I don't think this discussion has that question in scope, but I'll try to answer anyway. Oracle Cloud, I think Oracle started a bit late in our cloud journey. So we learned a lot of the things from different clouds, right? For example, things like regions that can be provided to customer. They are unique to that customer, private regions for the customers, right? And we can build those kind of regions really quickly, things like that. And other than that, we had that experience already built in, which other clouds learn slowly. So our network stack, our pricing, if you think about our compute, even Oracle functions, ARM support, if we compare the pricing with anything else in the market, you will see that we are far ahead. It's using Oracle Cloud is far cheaper than anything else. For this discussion, even if you see our free tier is a lot more generous, I think, in compared to any other cloud. So there are so many regions, but yeah, that's what I can think of right now.
Okay. Yeah, there's a question, do we need to run it on our own tenancy, or is there an event code for this event? You can run this session on your own tenancy. I've put the link in the chat. So Atul, you're good to move ahead.
Cool. Let's move ahead. Okay, let's talk about what do we already have set up, right? We have few things already set up. I have my own tenancy, and I'm the admin for that tenancy. If you are not for your tenancy, then you need to create a user, provide relevant permissions to that user. All that information is already in the quick start link that I just showed, and you can follow that along and set up your own user and all. Other than that, I have also set up a VCN. That VCN would be actually attached to your function application, and your function would pick up IPs from there whenever required, right? The steps to do that is also in the quick start guide, and you can follow that. Those two things I have, and then we'll go and we'll try to create. First, what we are going to do is we are going to create a function application, and then we are going to create a hello world function and see how that configuration looks. Okay, so let's start with the policy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a policy for our function, which are mandatory, which your function would require before you can actually that function can be created and use your subnet and infra. So I'm going to navigate to identity and security and policies. I have this compartment set up for this demo. So select the compartment that you want to create the policy in. Though for policy, I think it's always better to just create it in the root compartment. You can click create, provide a name to your policy. So let's name it demo lab, right? And let's provide a description. This is the compartment where the policy will be created. We already have a quick function policy create help use case, right? So you simply select the functions. This policy, these policy statements, they will give users access to create, deploy, and manage Oracle functions and application. Select a group of users you want to provide these permissions to. So my user is an administrator. I'll do it, provide it to the administrator. And then you can select which location you want to provide, which compartment you want to provide these permissions to. So I'll select my demo compartment. And after that, I can simply click create. So these are the policies that we have now created. After that, the user that I'm using right now, they'll be able to go and create functions and application. So let's do it. Let's move to developer service, functions, applications. Let's select the correct compartment. Okay, so now before creating the application, let's talk about what an application is, right? An application is a sandbox for your functions which are actually related together. So for example, your application code, it might be doing multiple things, right? It might be, a part of it would be talking to a network, part of it would be downloading few files and other stuff, right? If you want to create a function doing all of that stuff, it's probably advisable to just create multiple functions that do one thing quite well, right? But you still want to tie those functions up in some kind of sandbox. And that sandbox is application. So all the functions which are related, doing similar or related work, you can create one single application for that. So let's create it. Let's name this application. Let's name it my first. I already have a vSync created, but you can create your own, and the steps to do that are in the quick start guide. Let's select few subnets that we want for this vSync, and that's it. After that, we can simply create our application. Okay, so our application is created. Now I need to create a function here, right? As you can see, once the application is created, you jump to your application page, and this application page have a quite good getting started guide, right? We'll just follow this. And for that, we have two options. We can either follow a cloud shell setup, or we can follow a local setup. In case of local setup, you can set up everything, for example, FNCLI and everything else that is required in your local machine, which will include authentication and things like that. And in case of cloud shell setup, you get a lot of that built in, right? So your FNCLI is already installed, your authentication is already configured, and things basically becomes a lot simpler, right? So we'll go that path. I'll launch the cloud shell, and it will take a few seconds to launch. And while that is happening, let's answer any questions that we have. AWS cloud is same as Oracle cloud or different one? It's definitely different. Can we use two different subnet, private and public? Yes, you can, as I showed in the demo. Okay, so our cloud shell is launched. Now we just need to follow these steps. I'll try to explain them along the way, but even if you just copy and paste them in the cloud shell, everything would be fine. Okay, so first we are doing FN list context. FN is FNCLI, so a specific command line interface just for functions, which provides you all the managing capability. Let's run this command. I'll copy it and paste it here. Okay. So as I can see, there are two different contexts here. One is the default one, other is the EU Frankfurt one, which is already configured for you, by the way, automatically, right? And that is what we want to use. If you see the second command, it says FN use context EU Frankfurt. That context is already configured, so we don't need to run that command. Let's move to step 3. In this step, I'm updating the compartment that we are trying to use to our FN context, so that our FN context know where to create functions and update things and things like that. And as you can see, this help has already filled up the context OCI, right? So this is the same compartment where I created my application, and this help automatically picked it. So I'll just copy it and paste it here. And context is updated. And then I need to update the registry, right? So this is the OCIR repo URL that you want, where you want to post your function image. Only thing to keep in mind here is that your OCIR repo should exist on the same region where you are creating your function, right? So I'll copy it, I'll paste it, and I'll basically update the repo name here. You can provide your own repo name, but I can say demo, and the context is registered. Now, this step points to generating an authentication token. So let's open it. Okay. So this is where you can generate the authentication tokens. All you need to do is click generate token, create a description, and you will get a token. This token would be used to log in with your OCI repo, right? I have, as you can see, I have already generated the tokens. So I'm not going to do it. But after that, in this step 6 will need this token, right? So what we are doing here is that we are logging in with this OCI repo, with this, sorry, with this OCI repo, with this username, right? So let's just copy it and paste the command. It will ask for the password. The password is same as the authentication token you generated. So I'll type that as well. Give me a second. And login succeeded. Once the login succeeded, we can probably try to see how many apps are there in the context that we have created till now. So I'll run fn list app, and you can see the app I created is visible to me, which means it should be ready to use, right? After that, this is the part where I created an application, and then I configured my FNCLI and Docker so that I can use that application. Now I'm ready to create my function, right? To do that, I need to run this fn init runtime Java hello Java. What this does is basically I'm creating a sample function for the runtime Java. We have already seen that there are multiple runtimes that we support, which includes Python, Java, Node, others, right? You can use any of them there. And then this is the function name that we're going to create. If I do ls in my directory, I already have that function. So let's just quickly delete it. Gone. Now let's copy this application and run it, right? So it's saying that function boilerplate code is generated. Let's go and see what it has generated. Let's do an ls. Let's go to hello Java. Let's see an ls. And as you can see, there are 3 files basically: a YAML file, a form file, and some function source. So first look into the YAML file. If I do form.yaml, the file itself is quite simple. It has a function name, version, runtime, the build and run image, which is already pushed by function CLI. It will be used by them. Similarly, the command would also be used by it. So we don't need to take care of, don't need to care about that. And then let's look into function source really quickly. So I'll go to main, hello function.java. So this is the function, a sample function that was created. This is really simple. All we have is a hello function class, a handler, and then we just return hello. So a simple, very simple hello world function. Now let's go back to our tutorial. We have created a sample function, right? Now, next step is to actually build that function and then invoke it, right? So for that, we need to go into that function directory where we are already there. Let's deploy that function, right? Before deploying it, let's just look into this command. We are doing an fn deploy, and we are providing the app name, right? Which is the app we just created. And because we are running inside a function directory, which already have a YAML, this FNCLI will pick all the metadata it requires from this YAML file. So I'll just copy it, paste it here, and run it, right? Now this will create a Docker file and a temporary Docker file for you. It will build that Docker file, and it will build your code, copy your code to that Docker file, basically prepare all of your function, and push your function to the OCI repo that we just created in this stuff, this one, right? And all of that information that it needs would be taken by either FNCLI context, where we set up the compartment name, authentication, Docker setup, things like that, or it would be picked up by function YAML file, which has things like function name, function size, and other stuff. Okay, while this is building, let's look into a few questions if we have. The EU Frankfurt 1 context got created due to creation of application. No, actually, this is the Cloud Shell doing it, because Cloud Shell knows that you are running in EU Frankfurt. It knows that the context that you would probably use most would be EU Frankfurt 1, and that's why it created it. So even if you don't create application and start Cloud Shell, you will see the same context. What are supported config for Dockerfile and Graal VM in FN? So the function itself, function code itself looks quite similar to what we have in Dockerfile. But I think there would be separate tutorials available. If you search OCI function with custom Dockerfile, you will find a good tutorial there that would give you the sample Dockerfile, and you can add your steps there and basically use that Dockerfile to build function instead of this Dockerfile, which was created by FNCLI temporarily, and use it to build it, right? So you can have your own Dockerfile, have almost anything you want there, and similarly for similar stuff for Graal VM as well. Okay, so let's come back to this function. We have built the function and we have deployed it, which means we built a Dockerfile, we built our code, we packaged everything, we pushed that package to OCIR. After that, we called function control plane to create a function create API, passed all this data to, and created a function as well, right? What's left is to actually invoke that function. Now that function exists, we can have different kinds of triggers to invoke that function. As of now, I'll just invoke it using FNCLI. So I'll copy this code, this command, paste it here, and try to invoke the function. Now, because this is first function invoke, and during your first invoke, the function needs to set up a lot of configuration, which includes our runner VM, which would be exclusively used by your function. So we don't share hardware in the background between other applications and functions for security purpose. So this invoke will take a bit longer, somewhere around 20 to 30 seconds. But once you do it and it's successful, the second and other invokes would be a lot faster. So as you saw, the first invoke took probably 20 seconds, but the second invoke is within seconds. Okay. So at this point, what we have done is we have created an application. We have created policies around that application so that the current user can actually use those applications. And then we configured Oracle functions, created a simple hello world function, invoked it, and everything is working fine. This was first part of the demo. I'll answer if there are any questions on this till now. Okay, what is the location where Java code is placed? I'm not sure if I got the question correctly, but if you mean where we push the build Docker image, then we pushed it to the OCI repo of your tenancy. You can check it. If you mean that where we created that code, as of now it's in the Cloud Shell, but you can always create it in your laptop or any machine and build your function from there. How the Docker file is created. The Docker file is created by FNCLI. It has a template Docker file for all kinds of languages we support. And it basically generates the Docker file, give a Docker build command, and then because of that, your Docker file is built into an image which is pushed to OCIR. But you always have the option to create your own Docker file. We have some really good samples available in our sample Git repo, and we have a good write-up available on how to use custom Docker file with Oracle functions. If you'll search for it, you'll find it, or we can share the links as well. How does FN service know which class to run in case there are multiple classes in the source code? So there is a function contract, and that function contract define that there should be a class with a specific name and specific handler. You have to have that, and after that, your code can call or create any classes you want. What are the parameters we have to pass to log into OCI registry? Yes, so the example that you gave, Docker login -u, username and repo name, that works fine. Let me actually show it here. These are the parameters. And yes, it will work with in your local machine as well. It will work. It's exactly the same basically. So let me actually show this. If you go to local setup, right, other than few steps which are here, right, where you create your API signing key, you install FNCLI, and you configure your CLI basic stuff, right? Other than that, all the steps are actually same, right? So everything that I'm showcasing with our Oracle Cloud Shell, you can run it locally. Next question is, how come second run is faster? Each time Docker image has to load. Okay, so first time when you, I think I already explained it, but let's do it again. First time when you invoke your function, in the background, we create a specific VM for you, right? And we configure that VM so that it can use your tenancy. We download your own Docker image and things like that. And because of that, first run is a bit slower. But with second run onwards, because we don't have to do all of that stuff, including the Docker images already downloaded in that VM, the second run would be a lot faster, right? Now that runner, that VM that we have created, that won't be alive for forever, right? Once you do the first run, if you keep invoking function at certain frequency, let's say 10 minutes, right, that runner would be there, and you will always see very low latency while invoking functions. But if you have a function that, for example, invokes once a day or once in an hour, things like that, in that case, function have to go and create those runners each time. And because of that, your invokes would be slower, right? If you cannot handle, or if that latency is a problem for your application, you can use a feature called provisioned concurrency, with which you can basically configure and tell function service that I need these many runners, or I need these many function slots always be available for me. And if you do that, those function slots will always be ready for you, and you will see faster latencies. Next question. Can you please elaborate on how this Hello app can contain multiple functions? Is that every time I'm building a function image, does it get added to the already existing list of functions that are already built? If so, should we know the version of app Docker image in function YAML file? Okay, so this Hello app, okay, so this Hello app can contain multiple functions. Only thing there is that your function should have a unique name. So let me actually showcase that. So this is my app page, and if I go to functions, I see a function named Hello Java here, right? So all the functions that you will push with the same name, Hello Java, the image would be updated here, and this function would be used. But if you created a function with new name, which we will do, by the way, in this demo, you will get another entry here, a new function, and that function would be completely unique. You can manage it separately from the first function. If something goes wrong while executing the function, how do one can troubleshoot it? Can you show such scenario in this demo? I'm not sure if we'll get time to showcase such scenario, but I can show you this. You have this logs feature, right? And if I enable these logs, you will get, I just basically need to click this, enable logs. You can put function logs in your code, and then you will be able to see those logs in this app dashboard. for all the function invokes that you're doing, right? So if you want to debug, you can debug that. Can we use different programming languages in F1 apart from the supported one? Okay. Yes, you can use different programming languages. The supported one that I talked about, those are the languages for which we have ready to use FTK. So the configuration becomes a lot simpler. But if you want to use your own specific languages, we have function contract, open source and published. You can implement that. Actually, there are few FDKs which are supported by community as well. So it has already been done. You can use any language you want. You just have to support that function contract. Would we be using an IDE if we are creating the Java code from our local laptop? Yes, you can use an IDE. And actually, you can use an IDE in Oracle console as well. Let me show that. So there is a code editor option. If you click it, it will open a code editor for you. And you can edit your function that way. Okay, so next question. How can we automate OCI CLI commands to manage OCI resources using Oracle functions? I think that is a specific use case. You can probably reach out to Oracle support, and they should be able to guide you. Because yeah, I've not got the whole context, so without that, it would be hard to answer. This OCIR have public access? No, you can configure that access. Can we call other function from the hello world function? Yes, you can. And if you go to our function sample in GitHub, you will find a function sample which does that. So you can use that as your base code. Can we develop REST APIs using these Oracle functions? Yes, you can. Is it possible to implement redundancy for function in case if there is a failure crash of the primary function? So I'm not sure if I got whole of your question, Kavita, but yes, it is possible in a way that, for example, if you configure your function using events, right? You can configure such that your function would be called again if the primary function has had a failure. So that can be done, but I'm not sure if I answered your question. You can probably reach out to function team or Oracle support for your specific question. Okay, so I've answered all the questions. I was in this cloud editor, so let's just quickly showcase that as well. So if you see, I have hello Java function here. I can open it. Just give it a minute. And if I go to file, I see my code, right? And same thing you can do for in your local machine as well. You can use your code editor, or you can use it in the Oracle console itself. So I think that answers the question. Let's move. Okay, so till now, we have done a simple, we have created a simple hello world function, right? Because we have time, I think I'll try to go to a bit complicated example where we are going to create a function that reads the data from an object storage bucket, and then it copies that data to another bucket, right? This is again, the code, as I told you before, it's in the GitHub sample, and the function can be used for backup or some kind of data manipulation stuff if you want, right? The use case is a bit complicated because what we are going to do is we are going to create two object storage buckets, one as the source bucket, one as the destination bucket. And for the source bucket, we are going to emit an event whenever a file is uploaded to that bucket, right? Whenever the file is uploaded, an event will occur. That event will call or will invoke the function that we have created, right? that function will read that file from the object storage bucket and then write that file into the destination bucket. That's what the function will do. For that, the function will need some permissions. The function will need policies so that it can actually access, get the read-write access from those buckets. Also, we need to configure Oracle events so that they can read the events emitted by our source bucket and then calls function, call this function, right? So it would be a better overall proper use case, which would probably be quite similar, a lot more similar to the applications in real world. So that's what we are going to do. Before that, I see that there's a request for the GitHub, sharing the GitHub link. I think Jane will do it, or I'll share it at the end of this presentation.
Yes, the GitHub link is in the chat for anybody who wants to use that link.
Okay, so let's start. So I'm in my Java function. Let's go back and then do an LSR. So as you can see, there is another directory here, which is this, right? This is simply a clone of the sample function that Jane has shared. We will use this, and I'm going to deploy this function, right? So if I do an ls, this is a Python function, not a Java one, but otherwise it looks quite similar. It has a source file, it has a YAML file, it has the requirements and other languages specific stuff, right? That's what it have. If I look into the function code, it's again a bit more complicated. This handler will get called. This will authenticate using a resource principal signer. This would be required because we are going to access object storage with that function, object storage bucket with this function. It will get some metadata from the body of the event that it has been generated from, and then it will call a function, another function called another routine called copy object, which is here, right? Which will basically copy the file that was uploaded to the source bucket to the destination bucket, right? So this is what this function does. Now let's deploy this function to the same application that we created. For that, the command would remain same. We are in the correct function. We will do this, and this should deploy the function. This is being deployed. Let's close it. So it will take a bit time because it's time to build the function, download all the base Docker files, compile the code, copy it, and then it will upload it to the OCI. Okay, so the function is created. And as you can see, the function is also listed in this application page, right? So these are two functions in this application now. You also have an invoke endpoint, which you can use if you want to invoke directly using HTTPS, but we are not going to use it that way. Now the function is created. Now, as I told you, this function uses some object storage buckets, right? So let's go and create it. So for object storage, go to storage, go to buckets, select the compartment that you want to create buckets on, and then create the bucket. So I'm going to create two buckets here. One would be my source bucket, which is test, right? And then I'll click this emit object events, which means that this bucket will emit the object events whenever there's any object uploaded or updated or uploaded to this bucket. So I'll click it, I'll create it. This bucket is created. I'll also create the destination bucket, right? And in this case, because this is destination, this do not need, nobody is listening for the events from this bucket. So I don't need to click it. I'll just say create. Okay, these two buckets are created. Now, because our buckets are here, but function itself do not have the permission to use these buckets, right? Before that, we provided user policy to so that they can access function itself and create function, things like that. Similarly, we need to provide functions the permission or policy to basically access these buckets, right? For that, we need to create a dynamic group. For that, click in Identity and Security, go to the dynamic groups, and then click Create, right? Provide a name. So I'll provide function dynamic group. So basically, dynamic group is a group of resources, right? Which matches this criteria that we are going to provide now, and all the policies that are provided to this dynamic group will be applicable for those resources, right? So as I told you, because function itself is not the function itself is not a resource that would be alive always, right? It will be created whenever you are actually invoking the function. You can't provide permissions to that instance. You have to provide permission to that resource. So that's what we are going to do. So let's put a matching rule here, which says for the resource type FN function, and the compartment ID is this OCID, which is the OCID of my compartment that I created for this lab. Any resources which are matching this criteria would be inside this dynamic group. And of course, this would be the function that we are going to create. So let's create it. Now the dynamic group is created. We'll attach some policies with that dynamic group. So for that, let's move to policies. For that, click on Identity and Security, go to policies, right? And that we do in the root compartment. So I'll select that. You can see that there is one policy already there that we created at the start of this lab, right? I'll create one more just for object storage. So I'll name it function. Let's name this function object storage demo. I'll put the same in description. This time I'm not going to use policy builder because this is a custom policy, so there's no template for it. But what I need to do is I need to provide the function resource in that dynamic group so that it can access object storage, right? So if you see here, we are providing this dynamic group function device group that we just created, so that it can manage objects in this compartment, and so that it can manage buckets in this compartment. So these two policies will create, and we'll click on the create. Okay, so now we have created a function, we have created a dynamic group, we have created our object storage, and we have object storage buckets, and we have also created the policies so that function can use object storage, right? Now, only thing missing is how would we invoke the function? How would the object storage, how would the function know when object has been uploaded to the object storage and when it should run, right? So for that, we are going to use OCI events. Give me a second. Okay, so to configure OCI events, click on observability and management, click on the event service rules. Okay, now select the right compartment. And as we see that there is already an event there, but the state is deleted. So let's just create another one, and I'll call it copy object 2. And I'll just provide a description. Now, what kind of event we want? So we'll select event type and which service we want event from. We want it from object storage. So let's select that. And then what conditions you want to generate this event in? We want to generate when an object is created and when an object is updated. These two options, right? Similarly, add another condition. And in this time, we'll select an attribute. And why we're going to do is because which bucket, right? So in this case, the first event is for the object create and object update. And in the second condition is just a specific condition on which buckets you want to generate this event from, right? So let's provide a bucket name here, right? And then in this case, this event will generate an event, but what will it do, right? So let's select the action. So the action, as you can see, there are three things supported. We need to select function. So it will call a function. Which compartment? Let's select that compartment, this one. Then it will fetch the application name for you. We already have the application name here. And let's see, these two functions are available in that application. So we want to call this one. Once this is done, we can say, click create rule. Let's wait for a bit. And as we can see, this rule has been created. Now our workflow is complete. We have the buckets, we have the event emitting from that, we have this rule, which will call a function, and that function will do the stuff that it needs to do, which is basically copy files from one bucket to another bucket. Let's go and test it. So for that, I'll go to the storage. I'll go to buckets. And we have two buckets here. Let's go to this one. See, okay, this is empty. It doesn't have anything. So let's upload something. Let's provide a prefix, right? So let's say demo, right? And then let's provide a file that we can drop. Let me get a sample file, and I'll drop this file here. Okay, and I'll click upload. And the upload is done, right? So now, because this upload is done, it will take some time because an event would be generated. That event will call the function, which as I told you, it's getting called for the first time. So it will have, it will take a few seconds to basically configure that runner. And once that is done, it should get this file, copy it to the destination bucket. So let's wait for a few seconds while I can answer any new questions. Okay, so the question is, do we have database also in Oracle Cloud? Yes, we have. Next question, can you please highlight how that function subscribed to that object creation event? I think I have just showcased that. Okay. So, okay. So I think it's probably 10 seconds now. Let's see if I can see something in my source bucket, in my destination bucket, sorry. So let it try to see. So I have got this sample.txt in my destination bucket, and I can probably go and check my function metrics as well. So if I go to developer service, click on applications, go to my application, click on my function. It should have at least one invoke listed here. So see, this is the invoke that was listed here, and you will see list of all the invokes here. If you have enabled logs, you will be able to see function logs as well. But I think this finishes our workflow where this function was invoked when we generated that event, and it does what it needed to do. After that, it exits. In this case, you're paying for only the probably few seconds or milliseconds this function was running for, and that concludes our demo. Let's see if we have more questions to answer. Will it retry the trigger if it fails? Yes, if the function is not able to place, the events will retry it. How can we invoke functions from OIC? I'm not sure what OIC is. Are you talking about OCI CLI? If you're talking about that, then yes, we can invoke it. There is a function submodule there with the help of which you can create or invoke functions, Rajesh. But you have, if this do not answer your question, please explain and I'll answer. Where is the target bucket details provided? So that is hard coded to the sample of the function. If you see the code, let me actually showcase that. This is what basically creates the destination bucket names. It is the source bucket with a certain suffix, right? But this is not what you have to do in your application. Function also support the configuration. So for example, if you check this, you can basically provide specific configuration to function where you can provide any information that function will need, which can be the bucket name, any other configuration. So you don't have to hard code it. How to access function via REST endpoint. That is not part of this demo, but I think what you need to do is you need to configure an API gateway endpoint for your function, and after that, you can basically do the usual API gateway stuff and plug in that with your REST application. You should be able to provide, you should be able to search and find the tutorial that does that. Can we call external APIs using this function? Yes, you can. You just have to configure your VCN and subnets correctly so that it can call the external APIs. How much delay we can expect on performing some op using Oracle function and using REST endpoint. So as I told you, only the first invoke takes probably 20 seconds, while everything else is within few seconds. And as soon as your event or trigger has generated, functions is placed almost immediately. And after that delay, you can actually see the results, right? And the rest of the time is basically your function execution time. So if your function is taking a bit longer to execute, that is your code. But we place the call as soon as we get the event. How can we invoke the function deployed in OCI from Oracle Integration Cloud? I do not have answer for this right now, but I think I can send some information to Jane, who can forward it to you.
Yeah, we can do that following the event.
Yeah. If the object is too large, and what will happen? This crosses FN timeout. Okay, so for now, function use the maximum timeout that can be used with function is 5 minutes. By default, it's 30 seconds. So you would need two things if your object is too large. First, you need to create a bigger function. Let me actually explain that. If I see my function.yaml, it has the memory of 256. It do not have a timeout option, but the default is 30 seconds. If you want to increase that, you can increase that timeout up to 5 minutes, which is 300 seconds. And you can provide that configuration in function.yaml itself. Similarly, for memory, we use different function shapes. So the supported function shapes are 128 MB, 256 MB, 512 MB, 1024 MB, that is 1 GB, and 2 GB. Right. So based on the work that your function is doing, you can select any of these function sizes. So if your object is bigger, first you will need higher timeout, and second you will need the bigger function shape, and with that you will get more memory and more CPU. So the CPU and other resources are also proportional to this memory, which means that when you increase the function size, you get more CPU and more memory, and that should help handling the bigger file sizes. Okay, I don't see any more questions there. If there are any, please type them away, or I think we are done with this presentation.
Okay, thank you for that. That's been a great session. We've had a lot of interactive questions today. If you have any more questions, please feel free to ask in the Q&A. This session has been recorded and we will share it with you following the event. So we thank you for your time and look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.